In today's episode, we're taking a look at Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1, which I just completed for the very first time ever, and overall, I really enjoyed this. It was way better than I was expecting, but there were definitely some frustrating moments along the way. So let's get started with what my impressions of this game were like before I actually played it for the first time. So I've been told to play this game by so many people over the years, but I've always put it off for kind of two main reasons. One, I'm not a massive fan of stealth gameplay, and I thought the game might be kind of too slow-paced for my liking. I might end up getting too frustrated and give up on the game, or just not really enjoy it right from the get-go. And the second thing, I'm not a massive fan of politically motivated stories either, and I felt like the story might be a little bit too convoluted based on what I've heard about Hideo Kojima. Well, as I finally sat down to play this game, both of those issues were almost addressed instantly. The story was fascinating all the way through the game, and I feel like it was told incredibly well too. It was very cinematic, and I am just so impressed that they managed to pull off this level of cinematic quality and storytelling in the 1990s on the PlayStation 1. It really is a sight and sound to behold. Even the voice acting is way better than I ever thought it would be. And in terms of the gameplay side of things, it's a lot faster paced than I was expecting, and the stealth sections aren't actually that mandatory either. There's actually a lot of different ways of getting around the levels and dealing with the enemies, but even when I was forced to go into those more stealth-like sections, I was still really enjoying myself. In fact, some of the problems that I had with this game weren't really things that I thought I would even need to worry about with the game. So while I thought the story was fantastic, the gameplay was fun and a lot faster than I thought, it was mostly the controls that really frustrated me with this experience. Everything felt kind of sluggish to do, especially aiming and firing your gun, and because of the top-down camera angle as well, it was quite often quite difficult to actually see if you were aiming at the enemy because they were off the screen. The only way you can really see further is either by going into first-person mode, which then restricts your movement completely, or by pushing up against the wall so you can see behind it, but again, then you can't really do anything. And also, some of the controls for things like the sniper scope as well weren't really that intuitive because you're kind of lying on the floor and you kind of have to shuffle side to side to actually aim the scope. So there's a lot that I felt like could be improved in the controls department. Also, changing weapons was kind of fiddly as well. Having this list of weapons that come down the side and go across the bottom, I was just constantly moving this list up and down because I couldn't remember which direction it scrolled, and it did take a while to get back and forth between the different weapons. And also having the items on that same scroll wheel was kind of frustrating at points too. There's a lot of points in the game where you need to have a certain key card equipped in order to open certain doors, and if you don't have it equipped, you just walk into the door, even though you actually own that key card already. So I spent most of the game just opening the menu, going back to the card and taking off whatever I had equipped, just to go through the door, and then just to equip it again on the other side of the door. So in terms of gameplay, there were quite a few frustrating moments like that. I would have also really liked to have a full map instead of just the little map in the corner, because there were some points in the game where you kind of expected to remember where to go back to, which might have been like an hour before, and sometimes I did get a little bit lost and just ended up travelling back and forth, hoping that I would trigger a cutscene. So having an actual map with maybe markers of where you'd already been or where you haven't been, or where the next objective is, could have alleviated a lot of those frustrations, I think. And one thing that I was frustrated about at first, but it actually turned out to be a positive, was the boss fights. And I still feel slightly conflicted about these because they were kind of difficult to play in a way, but then I found out that you can actually use the codec and call someone for help as you're doing the fights, and they'll give you hints. But at first I didn't really understand that, and I did end up dying a lot, and I was getting quite frustrated when I was actually streaming this. But over time, as I learnt the intricacies of the game and how it expects you to play, and sort of how you should tackle these challenges as well, the boss fights actually kind of turned into more like puzzle rooms, and I actually really ended up enjoying them, especially in the later half of the game. And I do feel now that if I went back and played it again, I would actually have a much better experience playing it, now that I understand how you're expected to play the game, compared to where I was playing it for the first time on stream, where I was kind of ramming into these obstacles that I didn't really need to be frustrated about, because if you do just slow down a little bit, if you read what's in the codex, and if you just think about the items that you've got and things like that, you can easily progress through the game. And In terms of story, I don't really want to spoil anything, so consider this a spoiler-free video, but I was really impressed with the direction that the story took, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but there were some quite touching scenes. There was also a few scenes which I felt like were a little bit rushed. There was a few characters that were introduced in the game and a few like love interests in a way that kind of just came out of nowhere, and you had no context for why Snake should even care about these people, and it was kind of just forced on you, and I kind of felt like they were forcing me to feel a certain way when really there hadn't been enough time to develop these characters and their motives to really understand why I should feel invested in them. On the other hand though, a lot of the technology in the game was really well explained in a real world context, and I loved the fact that they used real world context and conflicts. There was a lot of talk about fights in the Middle East and about nuclear warheads in Russia and how the American government is trying to deal with these situations, and it feels just as real and just as poignant today as it would have done back in the 1990s as well. So they did an amazing job mixing the real world with the game world, and that even incorporated some FMV scenes as well, which I really wasn't expecting, and they flowed so well with the cutscenes, going from gameplay to cutscene to kind of higher resolution cutscenes with this like weird filter over the top, which kind of made it all feel a little bit dreamlike. But looking at it on the CRT especially, they came across incredibly well, and then that transitions naturally into the FMV scenes too. It was all really impressive and really cinematic, and I can see why people were so just mind blown at the possibilities of the PS1, and just what Konami and Kojima were able to achieve back then is honestly mind blowing, and I can easily see why this is some people's favourite game of all time. There were some parts of the story though where I felt like they couldn't quite decide if they wanted this to be a grounded story or if they wanted to go completely in a sci-fi direction and ignore all the laws of physics. So again, without spoiling, there was a lot of like telepathy stuff going on as well, which they didn't really explain. They kind of said that people got injected and it lets them have these powers, and there's all these people with different powers. A lot of the powers were explained in the real world, and you can kind of see how they might happen, but then there was a few, and I was just like, yeah, this is just way too in the realms of science fiction. Maybe Kojima just had a random vision in his dream the night before and just thought, yes, I want that character to be able to like disappear through walls or just go invisible by command or telepathically make someone's brain explode. But yeah, most of the time it was a lot more grounded than that, and I really appreciated that. And of course, Metal Gear Solid is well known for its fourth wall breaking elements, like the bit in the fight with Psycho Mantis, and this isn't a spoiler, this is everywhere over the internet, and if you've watched any gaming videos you probably already know about this, but it was so cool to be able to experience that firsthand and get him to read the memory card and move the rumble in the controller and stuff. It was just so cool, and it was so innovative for the time, and I'm really hoping there's more bits like that in the second and third games, which I'm definitely planning on playing at some point in the near future as well. There were a few bits in the game where I really didn't feel like it explained what you were supposed to do very well at all, and I spent way too long in these various sections of the game. Without getting into spoiler territory, there's a bit right at the end where you have to change the colour of something by being in certain places, and I really didn't understand what I was trying to do. There's a bit where you have to cool something down, so I went to stand in the cold room thinking that would work, looking for specific places to put the thing in order to try and cool it down. It turns out all you need to do is just stand there for like 5 minutes, and I'd done that, but the actual icon that you can see on the screen doesn't actually change. It's only when you actually press the menu button and look at the description can you actually see that that happened. So I ended up waiting about 20 minutes for this to happen, not realising that it already had, so that was really frustrating. And if you've played the game, you'll know what I mean about this point as well. The last kind of half an hour of the game did kind of feel like padding, where they were just making you go back and forth for the sake of it, whereas I just wanted to carry on the story and find out what happens right at the end of the game. But they're only minor little nitpicks, and the ending was just amazing. The boss fight at the end was just so impressive for the system, and I loved the sequence at the end and the end credits. I'm not going to spoil anything, I'm not going to put anything over the screen for this, but yeah, absolutely amazing stuff, and I can't wait to see how they carried on from that cliffhanger ending at the end of the game as well. So even though the game is almost 30 years old and I had no personal nostalgic attachment to the game, I can see why this is on so many people's top games of all time list, and if I had to give it a score today, it would probably be somewhere around 8.5 to 9 out of 10, so And that's going by today's standards, so it really holds up incredibly well. Like, if an indie developer today on itch uploaded a game like this with these PS1 graphics, I think it would still be seen as a masterpiece of the genre. And, you know, this kind of helped boost that genre into the 3D era, and they did an incredible job. The only other Metal Gear game I've played is the one on the Game Boy Color, which is a top-down version of this, and it plays kind of similarly, and I really enjoyed it there too. So to actually play this finally was honestly an incredible experience, and I can't wait to play the sequel. I did actually already own the second one, and I will be playing this at some point in the near future, and I was very excited to find inside that it also includes a making of DVD, and I just love it when game companies included extras like this with the game itself. So really excited not just to play the game, but also see how the game was made, and I'm sure there's a lot of things in the second game that kind of fixed a few of the issues that I had with the original. So definitely going to play it soon. Look forward to my thoughts on that. Let me know down in the comments below whether you've ever played the game before. Is it one of your favourites? Is it one that you're thinking of playing very soon? And that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this. Check out the previous episode where I talked about my experience with Ratchet and Clank for the first time up there, and I'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.